Forever. Dog.
Hello, and welcome to Outgrown, where we have guests on to discuss something from popular culture that they used to profoundly identify with and once thought would define them forever, but then eventually outgrew. My name is Julia Vickerman.
How are you, Julia?
I'm fantastic, Tom Scharpling.
Thank you. My name's Tom Scharpling, and this is going to be a fun episode. We have a great guest in studio. And, we talk about on the show how sometimes we have old friends on the show. And then, once in a while, we have a new friend.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we have a new friend. Today, we have on the show Michael McMillian joining us. Actor, podcaster, writer.
Amazing man.
Amazing man. Thank you for coming.
Man.
New friend.
Thank you. You're kind of an old friend
Okay.
to me because I've listened to you.
Wow.
And I've been a lurker on Julia's social media for a while. So you're kind of old friends to me.
Yeah.
But
Are you
I'm a new
working on
friend
her
to you.
account?
There's a lot of cute dogs on that account.
There are a lot of
Oh,
cute
yes.
dogs.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
So, Michael, what are we talking about today?
My so-called life.
Awesome. All right, and for those who don't know, My So-Called Life is an American teen drama. Are you excited about me reading this summary?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Read the summary and then I'll explain why I'm giggling.
Okay, cool. My So-Called Life is an American teen drama TV series created by Winnie Holzman. It aired on ABC from August 1994 to January 1995. The show stars Claire Danes as Angela Chase, a 15-year-old high school student who lives in the fictional Pittsburgh suburb of Three Rivers with her mother, father, and little sister. Each episode, which is usually narrated by Angela, follows her trials and tribulations as she deals with friends, parents, guys, and school. Besides Claire Danes, the show also launched the careers of several other major actors, including Jared Leto and Wilson Cruz. The show became a cult classic and has been frequently cited as one of the best teen dramas of all time.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I think
would
the
say.
best teen drama of all time.
Okay.
What were you up to in 1994?
In 94, I was a sophomore in high school, so I was the age
Wow.
that Angela Chase and her friends were
Mm-hmm.
when this show aired, which was a very unique experience to be like, those kids are my age. And obviously, I think Jared Leto and AJ Langer were older, probably in their late teens, early 20s. But Claire Danes was 15 at the time, so she was the same age as me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was exciting. But I have to say off the bat, I was giggling earlier because this might not only be the most vulnerable I've ever been in a podcast, this might be the most vulnerable I've ever been in my life. What
Wow,
we're about to
okay.
talk about.
Oh,
All right.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
We love that.
yes, this is like chum in the water for two sharks.
Well, we'll
No, I'm
try.
kidding.
We'll
This is
try to match your vulnerability.
Yes,
Well,
of course.
Because I do want to say this, much as I love the show, and I do love the show, a lot of my fascination with the show was Claire Danes / Angela Chase.
Okay.
I do not blame you.
So-
She's got a quality.
Yeah.
So let's set the table here.
Mhm.
Where are you living?
I'm growing up in Olathe, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City, Kansas. Although I mostly was in the Overland Park area because that's where I went to high school and all of that stuff. I'm a sophomore in high school, like I said. My interests at the time are I'm a cartoonist for the newspaper. I drew a lot.
Okay, for the school paper.
For the school paper.
What was the name of the school
The
paper?
Northwest Express.
Okay. So you were the house cartoonist.
I was the house cartoonist, and I also did write for the paper. My first story was an obituary of a girl who died from an asthma attack, who was also my lab partner in science. And that was the first story I ever had to write for the paper.
Oh my god.
And it was the front page story on the first edition.
Wow.
And that I also feel like is that could have been a story plot point in an episode of My So-Called Life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like
Wow,
the
that
school,
is-
like Angela gets assigned to write an obituary of a classmate she barely knew.
That would have been an episode.
Yeah. So
If there had been a season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I had achieved my goals at the time and gotten on the show, I probably would have pitched it
Yes.
from my cast chair.
Okay.
Gosh, that's a lot.
It was a lot. So
So
my sophomore year was already getting off to like a wild start and an emotional start.
That's really intense.
Yeah.
And was this the first time? I'm assuming this is the first time, because when you're a kid, it's one thing if somebody older than you passes away. That's traumatic in its own way. It's horrible in its own way. But nobody your age is supposed to pass away.
No.
Like, that's next level traumatic.
Yeah, and she had been a new student. She'd been a transfer from a different school and literally had been at school for a week before she like passed away over like Labor Day weekend.
Oh my God.
And so like she had been my lab partner. I had barely known her. And then like the next thing I know is like my mom is like pulling me up to her dad's house and I have to go like talk to her dad like a week after this has all happened. And I just remember like sitting at this man's kitchen table. He has no idea who I am. There's like all of these flowers all around the kitchen and just being like, so tell me about,
oh my God, I'm honestly gonna cry.
It was wild. It was wild. And my journalism teacher is like one of my all-time favorite teachers. He was a great guy. We're still in touch. He's like now a friend of mine. But I'm like, why did they make? I was like a cub reporter and a cartoonist. I don't know why I was given this assignment.
That is really heavy. They must have seen that in you.
They were like, this kid, he can really get to the emotional.
Or they're like,
here.
we're really gonna fuck this kid up.
Yeah.
McMillian, there's a front page story.
And I do remember being like, wow, I'm on the front page, so you're like pulled in like different directions. You have like pride, but then you're also like weirdly embarrassed and ashamed. I was like, I don't want to talk to this guy about this.
That's so much.
And
pressure.
I remember him being like, you have to go ask these questions. This is a reporter's job. You have to like get to it, And I was like, I don't want to.
Yeah, this seems like a job for an adult.
Fireable offense for a teacher to be like, and then he told my son that he had to chase down the story. He was grieving, and he just like, it sounds like the teacher. That sounds like, and this is why we're terminating you.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Mack.
Yeah. So you're a kid. You are starting to express ways of creativity, of expressing yourself, cartooning.
Acting's the thing I'm really getting into as well. And at this point, I'm like, I might become a cartoonist. I might become I was really into comic books and thought maybe I'll be a comic book writer, artist. But the acting bug was really calling to me too.
Well, I have a question about the comics. Were they what was the tone of the comics? Did you do a comic in the same issue as this obituary?
Probably. And I think actually I did. I think it was a 1-panel editorial cartoon. And there was a character who I had loosely designed on myself who went on to be a character called Mojo. Mm-hmm. And the strip was called Mojo and Lemonhead. And it was based on me and my friend Jill. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even have a head that looked like a lemon, but she liked the lemon heads.
Okay.
And we would listen to some of their stuff driving around in her Duster, her 1985 Duster. But the 1-panel cartoon of that issue was a kid's walking through the hall with his hat on backwards, and you see other kids passing by, and you can see a kid's got a pack of cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve, and there's a kid with a canister of dip in his back pocket, and maybe some other vice, and the principal's going, "Young man, no hats in school."
Whoa!
And it was, it was really a commentary on why am I getting yelled at when all this other stuff is going on?
You just nailed it.
Yeah, you really
love that.
Speaking truth to power with that one.
I'm impressed that they even let you. Was this a public school?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also drew comics for our
Mhm.
school paper, and if I would never be allowed to draw a cigarette, any mention of
Oh.
tobacco usage.
Yeah, well, I think again, like my journalism, he's like, "This is good. You're speaking truth to power. You're
This
like
guy's
really
cool.
Yeah, he was cool.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
And you're still friends with this guy.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just was home in Kansas City a couple weeks ago, and I had dinner with him and his wife, who was my honors English teacher as well.
Wow.
That's
in freshman
incredible,
year.
honestly.
They're great.
First of all, what's that all about? That you're friends with teachers? I couldn't tell you
Yeah.
anything about anyone from high school, teachers, students,
Yeah.
anything. It is I think I might be more extreme on the far end of the spectrum with this one. It's just like, I know nothing about it and it ever happened to any of these people. That's more me. Wait, I'm not in the hot seat here.
Well,
You're the one in the hot seat.
It's weird because I did not like my high school at all. I hated it. I really hated it. And by the end of my sophomore year, I would like wake up and like get ready for school and I would start crying because I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And my mom was eventually like, "What is going on with you?" And I remember like her sitting me down one afternoon and being like, "Okay," it was like in February or March, and looking at the calendar, and she's like, "Okay, let's count out the rest of the school days.
Oh, wow.
So you can just get your," and she's like, "See, it's only like, it feels like so many months away, but really you only got like 27 more days to get through," or whatever it was,
that's not a bad
That's
approach.
smart.
I mean, you could also
Yeah.
say, would you like to go to therapy?
Well, that was eventually I did go to therapy, and when I told my mom I was seeing a therapist, she cried and said she failed as a mother.
Oh,
So
no.
my God.
you know,
No,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
heavy.
It
But
was-
it's funny because I don't remember anybody else from this high school that I wasn't already friends with through theater stuff, extracurricular activities. So it is kind of funny that I'm friends with these two teachers, but they were great. And I think it's
Sure.
also like a testimony to how lovely they were.
They cared about you.
Yeah, I felt that.
Like in terms of like you, like I also, didn't love school, but there were a few teachers throughout my school journey who really glommed onto me. And this might have been your situation as well, where they were just like, I see something in you that you might not even see in yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
That kind of vibe. And like, I still talk to my
There was none
drama
of that going
teacher
on
from
my
high
end of
school.
things. Nobody saw anything in me. I was like, I don't like you guys. You don't like me. Let's both get through
Just
this
punching
as quickly
in your
as possible.
card.
Exactly. Here's my diploma. Best of luck to you. See you in the next life. No, it must have been the kind of thing where it's like, I know there's generalizations people make about like the Midwest and things, but it's
Yeah.
like the idea of sharing emotions and going to therapy and stuff. It's like it's still, I mean, it's not like, hey, there's this new thing, therapy, that just showed up in
Right,
Kansas,
right.
but there still are stigmas attached to that. I had it in New Jersey, which is, we're right next to New York City, and it still was in the air where you're just like, oh, something's wrong with you.
Yeah, that it's like shameful that you'd want to
Yeah.
figure out your own
Yeah.
emotions.
And I had friends at that time. It was kind of like Angela and Rayanne, where I was I was at a weird moment, weird crux in high school where I was friends with all the nerdy theater kids. I was friends with like the newspaper kids who were a different crowd. They were kind of a cooler crowd, even though they were nerdy in their own
the
ways.
newspaper kids.
Yeah, because the yearbook kids were really dorky.
Yeah.
But the newspaper kids, you go hang out with a newspaper kid at their house after school, and everyone's like smoking cigarettes and listening to cool music, and they were a little bit edgier.
Okay.
But then I was like, felt like I didn't relate to any of the jocks, but because I did plays and people kind of knew I was funny in these plays, like people would be friendly around me. But I had a couple friends that were like kind of the bad kids, like kind of like Angela and Rayanne, like really getting into real trouble, like where their parents would send them away to
Correctional.
correctional or like a clinic for a week or two that would like get in fights, and So it was weird. I was kind of like trying to figure out where I fit in and like who my friends were and like why do I have some friends who are like the nerdiest people in the world, but then some friends who like literally try to choke somebody with his chain wallet in the locker rooms.
Wow.
Like why am I friends with him? You know?
No,
There's so many facets to you.
Yeah.
So you were just kind of like the kind of kid that could adapt,
Right.
and could roll with situations. And what were you into in terms of entertainment before My So-Called Life entered your, like, what would have been like a TV show that you liked?
Well, I was already into Seinfeld at
Okay.
this point, and Friends started that same season. And I remember My So-Called Life came on at the same time as Friends, but My So-Called Life was on ABC and Friends was on NBC. So I didn't watch Friends right away, even though I was like, oh, everyone's talking about this show, but I like this show, and they're on at the same time. So I'd watch My So-Called Life, and then I would switch over to Seinfeld when that was done. And then I was really getting into Letterman.
Okay.
Like David Letterman was like, I watched Late Show every night. My mom would let me stay up, and I had a little tiny TV with like rabbit ears in my room by that point. So I kind of had a little bit more control about what I could watch and when I could watch it. But I'm trying to think I watched so much TV growing up. Like I watched every sitcom, everything. I always had shows, from the 80s all the way up. I was definitely into The Simpsons at this time. That was probably my favorite show, but I watched everything. It didn't matter if it was good or bad.
Yeah.
I was just in front of the TV.
Now, at this point, would you have considered yourself living in Kansas as like, I will get out of Kansas?
That's when this started.
Okay.
This year, my sophomore year, was like, I am done here and I have got to move on. I have an older sister who's 5.5 years older than me, and she lived in Lawrence, Kansas, which was like the cool town. Like that's where all the bands would come through and play at the Bottleneck. Like Mass Street was really hip. And she and her now husband were dating. That I think they just started dating around this time. We were just about to get together. So I go visit her in Lawrence. She'd already moved out of the house. It was just me and my mom and my dad living there. And I was like, this house is getting empty. My sister's moved on. It's time for me to get out of here. And I really started to daydream about escaping and being an actor and moving to LA. And a lot of that happened because of my obsession with this show.
Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. That's interesting because that's very similar to you. I didn't relate. I was in New Jersey. I was kind of fine. We're next to New York City.
Yeah, you take a bus.
I could go, I take the train or drive in, and suddenly I'm in the biggest, brightest city in America. So I had full access to all that stuff. I wasn't like longing for what was out there because I could kind of get it.
Yeah.
You were in South Carolina and you were feeling a lot of what Michael's
this
saying.
like small town, like this just doesn't feel right. You're like, this can't be what normal people feel like every day.
I remember laying in my bed at night and thinking, there's a big party happening somewhere.
And I'm not there.
I'm not there. And they're all waiting for me to show up, you know?
Yeah.
They're waiting for me to walk through that door and be like, yay,
and
he's
then that's
here.
what happened. You showed up to LA and it was like, yeah, finally.
He's here.
There's like a lot of delusion in this time period as well. And we haven't even really gotten into the show yet.
No, I know.
Oh,
well,
no, that's calm. Don't
well,
worry.
Let's get into it a little bit. So you actually watched it on its initial run on ABC.
I did.
Because I wasn't familiar with the show until it reran on MTV later.
Right. And then I hopped straight to MTV when it was showing in reruns, like almost a week after the finale dropped, or even before the finale. I think even before the finale dropped.
Yeah.
They were rerunning episodes at like 6:30 Central Time every night on MTV. And so I would come home from school or play practice and then at rehearsal, and then I would go down to the basement and once I got down into the basement and turned on MTV and started watching these reruns, I was like, this is Michael's space. Nobody come down here. And I just remember being so locked in with the show. And I would, when I first started watching it on ABC, I remember being like, my bedroom was on the ground floor next to the kitchen, and I could hear my mom and dad talking in the kitchen. I'd like shut the door. I'd like get on my bed and I'd be like lasered in. I was like, now I'm going to like my real world, which
Yeah,
is
my
the
real
world of
friends.
my so-called life.
Yeah.
My real friends
But
on
it's
television.
also like just escaping into a reality that looks very similar to
I
the one that I'm
know.
trying to get away from, which is
Yeah.
very strange.
I know.
Do you remember? Did you watch the first episode of the show?
I
on
think
its original
I
run?
missed the first episode, and I didn't see the first episode until it was on MTV. But
Okay.
I was on by episode 2 or 3 because there'd been a lot of press about the show and Claire Danes specifically. And I remember sitting in my sister's apartment at the time with her roommate Courtney, looking at an interview magazine that had a like 3-page spread of like Claire Danes and like some like Buster Keaton kind of goofy outfit, like young Diane Keaton, like doing like weird poses, like. And I remember Courtney being like, "Oh, she's really good. She's supposed to be really good. She's like the next thing." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard this show is really good." And I just like remember being like, also, I think I'm in love with this girl.
Makes total sense.
I'm like, oh, I remember she let me keep the magazine.
Oh.
And I began this is why this is really embarrassing, but I began this like infatuation with the show. And then I had the biggest crush on Claire Danes imaginable. So much so that I even remember going, this is not like, I shouldn't be this into a celebrity.
Like it was bordering on.
It was
it like painful for you to want her this badly?
Painful, and it was very innocent.
Yeah.
It was like being in love with the girl next door. And to this day, I question like, what was I in love with the character Angela Chase, or was I in love with Claire Danes?
Sure.
Because I felt a pull towards both of those identities.
I mean, really, you're just projecting whatever you
Exactly.
want onto this
Exactly.
sweet young girl.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, I know the feeling of like that longing for someone who you're like, I know I will never meet you, really.
Yeah, and I think there had a lot to do with like, she's my age
Yeah.
and she's on TV, and I didn't know a show could be so grounded and natural, and I was really excited by the idea of like, oh, you can just kind of like be in a there's like shows that are kind of like real life, as close to real life as I'd seen at that point, especially on network TV.
It did such a good job of capturing, like, even like, because Claire Danes has these monologues throughout the whole show. I do want to ask you in a second, like, what you remember about
Because I've
My
never
So-Called
seen the
Life.
show.
Oh, you've
So
never
sorry to
seen it
say.
at all?
I've never seen it.
Wow.
Oh
I've
my
never seen it.
goodness. Oh well, Tom.
Oh, you're taking. Sorry,
I didn't know
guys.
you'd never seen the
Yeah,
show.
no, I've
this
never
is
seen it.
This is actually
Okay.
a problem.
It's a problem. Oh no.
It's such a good show. It captures this like awkwardness and this like vulnerability and this, it's melodramatic, but like a real teen melodramatic.
Yeah, and very 90s,
So-
very
so
94.
90s. Like, also, I love that you're wearing your flannel.
I wore flannel today in honor of the code, the
Yes,
dress code of
I
the show.
know.
Also, a fun thing about that show too, this is also like the stuff that I would notice is it was the first show that I remember where the characters had limited wardrobes, like real kids.
They repeated outfits.
And you would see them wearing their clothes in different ways throughout the season of the show. And I was like, that's cool. I've
Yeah.
never seen that
That's
before.
really smart.
Yeah.
So there was like the brain, the actor, writer, producer brain in me was catching all of these little details. But then I was also having this like massive crush on Claire Danes.
So you're there are different channels happening in your
Yes.
head simultaneously, because you're saying at this point you're hugely into David Letterman.
Yes.
Who is, for me, what David Letterman represented, because I'm older than you are, than both of you are combined. Not combined.
That's not accurate.
I don't think that's true.
I remember in the 80s when late night started, what he represented was somebody who was just puncturing showbiz.
Yeah.
Like he would just say like, this is all a joke. And the idea these people come on these shows and they're fake sincere and stuff. Like he was the antidote to sincerity, to
Yes.
like maudlin sincerity that was like the defining thing of show business. But what it creates is a certain awareness. You're saying, oh, there's a whole other thing there. Then plus The Simpsons is doing it. So if you're tapped into that stuff, you probably have a very kind of not cynical, but you're aware of how things actually work versus how people tell you work. But conversely, there's this show that it seems like the most sincere,
earnest,
and earnest show, hard on your sleeve. And but it's like cutting through that stuff, like this bullseye that suddenly you're like, this show has my number.
Yeah, and I think that's really fascinating because I'm thinking like, okay, Simpsons, SNL, Letterman, Kids in the Hall, all shows that I loved. Like I really loved comedy. I loved absurdist stuff. I loved stuff that, held the mirror up to society and said, this is so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a performer, I wanted to be like a David Letterman or like, a Jerry Seinfeld. Like I wanted to have funny conversations with my friends and stuff like that. But I think that the emotional core of me had this very, and still does, this very earnest, this real pull towards sincerity. And that's always been, I think, in conflict with who I've been socially as a person.
Right.
Because I could never fully let go of that sincerity. And sometimes even among funny friends, I'll take someone very literally and miss the joke.
I do that too.
And then other times I'm like, I'm totally hamming it up and I'm nailing everything. But I think at the end of the day, I do tend to lean towards that real earnest thing.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just two different types of cutting through the bullshit. Is like this ultra authenticity, like actual vulnerability, and then also the biting satirical stuff like The Simpsons,
like a sarcastic kind of, exactly. And it really, that's what's the interesting thing is like that you do carry both of them simultaneously. I know I was as into comedy that was just crapping on everything and being snarky. But then I would also be just like the softest touch with other things that would just lay me out emotionally if it was the right thing. And that's clearly, you found the thing that just like hit you.
Hit me so hard. And it was very private too.
Yeah,
it was very
it
much
felt like a private show.
Yeah. I was like, this is the thing that I watch alone. I don't watch this with my friends. This is, again, me time. I remember there's an episode where Claire Danes is dancing to Violent Femmes in the opening, Blister in the Sun. And I think by this point, it had gotten around the house that I had a crush on this actress.
Oh, okay.
Oh no!
And
this is going.
And I remember like at the dinner table, my father being like, "Well, when I was young, I loved Ava Gardner," And I also was also like aware that like Claire Danes, I mean, beautiful, but like not a bombshell, not your traditional.
Like relatable, like it's just like
relatable,
To me, it's like, and we've talked like where it's like you have like Angelina Jolie, obviously insanely attractive person, but not somebody you expect to see walking down the street. It's like she's from another planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then like you have conversely, say Jennifer Aniston, who was in the whole Brad Pitt thing with Jennifer Aniston, equally as attractive, but seems like she could be somebody
right.
And it's like
she could be your sister's best friend.
Exactly, yeah. And
like,
then you could see her existing in your world potentially, even though you couldn't,
right?
Because she's
no way.
She's also insanely attractive.
She went to Le Petit Francais in L.A. and was a soon-to-be famous actress who won a Golden Globe while you were a sophomore in high school. Like, there's you're not ever going to. It's never happening.
Yeah.
So what you saw in her was like we could.
Oh, 100%. Wait. So
please,
I have to just get to the
table.
So the word had gotten around the house, and like not like a day or two later, I'm watching the show, and it's that episode which I had already seen where she's like dancing.
She just got over Jordan Catalano.
Yeah, and that's not even a scene. I just want to like make it clear that I'm not like sitting watching the show being like, oh my God, Claire Danes,
Sure.
Like,
no, I didn't think
I'm just in love with this person.
Yeah.
And my dad walks down with his drink and I'm like, oh no. And it's in the middle of this. And he's like, oh, oh, is this the actress you're in love with? And I just
my
my
and I just
God.
remember being like, don't get out of here right now. And he watched the whole segment where she's dancing, and he just goes, huh, and walks out.
Oh,
No,
devastating.
that just like I would have moved out at
Devastating.
that
I
point.
think that's
I
why
would've said,
I was
like,
like,
I
I'm
would have said
done.
like I'm gonna put a bag together. If you guys could just give me $100 to get my life started,
I will be. Listen, I'll be out in 2 hours.
just give me. Yeah.
Oh, because I mean, and that scene is so. I rewatch that one scene often because for some reason that just stood out to me as a young
I
girl.
think that's one of the scenes when people who liked the show, like that's the scene that's like stuck in your head with that show.
It just was like she's getting her power back because she's been spending. I mean, and she doesn't really. Let's be honest. I mean, she's not really over Jordan.
No,
but like,
and that's the whole
but she
tragedy
wakes-
of the show being canceled.
Exactly. But she just wakes up one morning and she's just like, I've been so in love with Jordan Catalano, and then one day I woke up and I was over him, and then like Blister in the Sun starts playing, and it's not even like sexual dancing. It's not like Britney Spears and Crossroads.
She's like a kid,
Sure.
She's like a real teenage kid.
Big baggy shirt. She's like loose shorts rolling around on the bed like somersaults kind of stuff. And it's just she's like free. It's just this like authentic moment of feeling like finally I'm not like so hung up on this guy. I know because when the way you're talking about your feelings for Angela Chase / Claire Danes, it seems like that the type of longing she had for Jordan Catalano, like you could relate to that kind of like painful longing.
Yeah, and I was also like, okay, so then there's Brian Krakow, who's the nerd who lives next door.
And did you like him?
I didn't, but I was definitely rooting for him more than Jordan Catalano because I definitely related more to Brian Krakow.
So it's Jordan Catalano,
It's Jared Leto.
Jared Leto. That's what
And
I thought.
he's
Beautiful young
he's
man.
the one that at school, all the girls that I was friends with were talking about Jared Leto and how hot he was, and that was kind of there wasn't a ton of buzz of this show around my high school, but the buzz that I did hear was how hot Jordan Catalano was, and I'd be like, well, I think Angela Chase is the best. You know what I mean?
And did you have friends that agreed with you?
Yeah, I mean,
Like when you say it was your private thing,
yes.
how private is private?
Well, not private enough that I didn't hang pictures of Claire Danes in my cubby in the journalism room.
Okay.
Oh my
So
God,
I did
cool.
advertise.
It's kind of the opposite of
No,
a private
this is the
thing,
problem.
actually. this sounds incredibly public.
So this is where I look back on it and go, what was going on with you, dude? Because I would it got to the point where like friends would give me clippings of Claire Danes in like Us Weekly or whatever it was, whatever magazine it was, People.
Okay.
And I would like cut out a picture and I'd put it on my
Do you feel like you were trying to reach out to people in a roundabout way to talk about this? Because you're showing people, hey, I like this character and I like this actor.
I will say that this was in the newspaper like office in the classroom. It wasn't my locker.
Okay.
And I felt like that was a safe place. Let me just tell you that my sophomore year, I hated my school so much and I was so anxious about being around my own classmates that I would go up to the journalism room and I would eat my lunch there.
Oh, wow.
With my journalism teacher because I couldn't handle the anxiety of taking a lunch tray or taking my sack lunch and trying to find a table to sit at.
It's the worst feeling.
Even though that I look back now, I was the vice president of my freshman class.
You were?
I was not an unpopular.
What a contradictory
I know.
thing
I
is
was not an
happening here.
unpopular person, but I felt like I did not fit in.
They
with
just
anybody.
people made you uncomfortable.
I was so anxious.
Did you feel like people didn't get you? Or did you feel like, and I'm not saying this in an insulting way, everybody around me is like, I'm smarter than these people, or they don't get it the way I get it? Like how did you see yourself in relation to your classmates?
I think that a lot of the people that I went to my high school with were just so you guys know where this goes, I end up finishing high school, junior and senior year at an arts academy in Michigan.
Oh, wow.
So there's definitely a little pretension there. But I also just remember feeling like outside of the theater kids and outside of the like journalism kids, I couldn't relate to anybody. Instead of listening, Nirvana was huge at the time, and all the jocks were listening to Nirvana and Metallica. And like I was obsessed with the Who's Tommy Broadway musical.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was going through some weird development phase where I think I was literally, and I think a lot of teenagers are like this, at a 6-month stretch in their lives where they are clinically insane.
Sure. Well,
yeah, I would agree.
I just want to, before I weigh in on how insane you are, you were in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Broadway is in New York City,
Yes.
which is about 1,500 miles away.
I'm pulled in towards two coasts.
Did you ever see Tommy live
Yes,
on Broadway?
my dad took me that year.
Okay.
Wow, your dad was trying to understand.
No,
he had
he was
moments.
really trying.
He took me to New York around the holidays, and we went and saw the Who's Tommy.
Okay.
And I think he was kind of excited because he did like pinball.
Okay.
And that was
Sure,
maybe the
of
only
course.
thing he could relate to. I
Pinball
mean, this is a
wizard,
musical
yeah.
where like one of the big songs in the first act is called Fiddlin' About.
Yeah.
And it's a
Sung by Uncle Ernie,
Yes.
who's a,
wicked Uncle Ernie.
yeah.
Like
All right.
it's a dark, I loved
Yeah.
the music and I liked
Yeah.
the Who because I did like classic rock. And so I loved the idea of like, oh, there's a Broadway show that's also classic rock.
Yeah.
But it was not relatable in any way, shape, or form. But he took me to see the Who's Tommy, and he took me to see Damn Yankees with Victor Garber and Baby Newirth.
Okay.
And that was a fun show. But I brought back a Who's Tommy mug and gave it to my honors English teacher, who I'm still friends with today.
Aw.
And I would talk about the Who's Tommy in English class constantly.
And he's just like,
She's like,
oh, she's listening.
okay.
She's like, I can't
Yeah.
relate to this. It's not
Nobody
playing
could.
here. It's not
No,
playing here.
no,
You're
no.
the only one. It's almost like you could have made up a play and told
Yes.
everybody about it because they have the same chance of seeing
Yeah.
a non-existent play as they do one that's
I had to bring a mug back. It's like
To
it's like
prove
if you
that it
could bring back
existed?
something from your dream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like,
Show
it
it, yeah.
exists. See, there's a mug about it.
That's so sweet.
So then your fandom for this show seems like it was the hub of everything.
It was
though.
the hub of everything.
And how intense did your fandom get for My So-Called Life?
I wrote Claire Danes a fan letter, and I drew it as a comic.
Okay.
Whoa. Was it Mojo?
It was Mojo, who was me.
Okay.
And I don't remember what I said, but I just remember it was like
Okay. So
I remember it was like panel. No, it wasn't even panels. It was like sequential drawings of like me having a conversation, like with my arms crossed, or like having an expression,
oh, this is so charming, honestly.
and being like,
Ooh.
"Hey, I'm so and so. I love My So-Called Life. You're a great actor." I don't know. I definitely was not like, "I love you. I would love to marry you one day. We're gonna work together
Yeah.
in LA." Like none of.
Yeah.
I knew to like.
You weren't saying like, I'm going to shoot the president
Yes.
to prove my love to you.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
You were like trying to keep it cool.
I was
Yeah.
trying to keep it cool as much as like drawing yourself into a fan letter was keeping it cool.
sure.
You know,
But there's a part of you where you're just like, I just gotta tell this
I
person.
have to get this
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember where I found her fan mail address, but it was in some magazine
They
somewhere.
just used to be in magazines.
It just used to be in magazines. And I think even a friend probably was like, you could write her a letter.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote this letter, and then 2-3 months later, I'm going out to get the mail because I'm waiting for the new issue of Wizard magazine.
Of course. You're gonna need to find out what's going on with Todd McFarlane.
Yeah. What's happening in the Image universe
What's going on with Spawn
today? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is Bloodsport gonna ever have an issue 3? We'll
Yeah.
find out.
With Wetworks.
Yeah. Will is Portasio even on this book anymore? What's happening?
so you go to your mailbox looking for the new wizard.
So my dad had installed this old timey mailbox,
Mhm.
you know, and you'd pull down the thing and all the mail would come spilling out.
Okay.
It like
Under the
opened
ground?
like this. Yeah, you had to kind of like, and it was really rusty and heavy to. And I remember yanking that down and the mail coming out, and right on top is a postcard with Claire Danes' face on it.
Oh my God.
And I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And I pick it up,
Yeah.
I flip it over, and it says, Michael, thank you so much for the artistic letter, Claire.
Whoa, she actually wrote it?
Well, I think she did.
Well, that artistic letter.
Yeah. So someone on her team saw it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what happened?
Wow, it
What
wasn't
happened?
even like a form thing. It was like to
No, it was
you.
handwritten.
Wow.
Said my name, and it was a picture of her with like next to some flowers. It was clearly like one they'd printed up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like trembling and like running into the house. I'm like, I can't believe this actually happened. And I was looking for that postcard because I know it's somewhere.
Mhm.
I flipped through all my keepsakes and I was like, oh God, I wish I could bring it in today, but I couldn't find it. Now, a couple years later, this is when I was now at Interlochen Arts Academy in my junior year. Another kid at school who was from Michigan got a job as like a 1 or 2 line role in the Polish wedding that Claire Danes was in. And he would leave school and drive like 2 hours away on the weekends to go film. And I remember like, well, now it's really meant to
You're
be.
closer
Yeah.
than
We're
ever.
closer than
Yeah.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my other friend would be like, can we come to set and meet Claire Danes? And he was like, yeah, I'll see what I can do. And he kept saying like, yeah, it'll happen. And it, it never happened. And he saw the postcard because I absolutely brought it with me to Interlochen and put it up on my bulletin board in front of my desk.
Uh-huh.
He was like, I think that's her mom's handwriting. That's
Oh,
what
fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
so-
don't like that at all.
Yeah, I didn't
First of all,
like-
how do you know? What are you
Yeah, what are you
scrutinizing
doing?
Claire Danes' mother? He's got a bit part in this thing, and yet he knows what Claire Danes' mother's handwriting looks like.
Yes.
Oh, I hate this kid.
Yeah, I don't like that kid at all.
He was gatekeeping.
He was gatekeeping Claire Danes.
Claire Danes. So I
That's
didn't.
not exactly
I didn't get to
Claire
meet her,
Danes.
but I remember being like, "It's happening. It's
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
closer to
Yeah.
reality."
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool.
So that's like the peak of your fandom is you sending this cartoon.
Yes. Yeah.
And then getting back a nice postcard.
Yep.
That's what did that feel like to you? Like what were the feelings of that? And did any of this have anything to do with propelling you to this art school?
100%. 100%. So the honestly getting that postcard was probably up until that point one of the best moments in my life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is real. There is a way that you can reach out and the universe will reach back in some way, because to me, that was tantamount as like pulling off a real magic trick.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Like you like speak something into the void and then the void comes back
Yeah.
and you're like, oh shit, I have
Yeah.
powers. You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
I can make things happen. I can
And that it was
manifest
like
things.
your creativity and your drawings, like
Right.
your like that was so unique
yeah.
to you.
And I hadn't thought about this, but I think like relying on a talent, it's like, what's going to set me apart from any other
Yeah.
letter that they're
Yeah.
going to get? I'll draw it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
So I think that was encouraging as well. And just thinking to myself, I knew by the end of my sophomore year and I knew by the time that show was canceled, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be, I really wanted to be on My So-Called Life, but I was like, if I can't be on My So-Called Life, I would know I want to act on TV shows that are as good or I get excited about the way that this makes me
Yeah.
excited.
So this really propelled you forward. Her sending you this postcard
Yeah.
was a key factor
Oh,
in
yeah.
you saying, I'm going to go for it.
Yep. 100%.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
and
really
because she was
cool.
also like my age, I was like,
Yeah.
if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
You know?
So was it hard to move? Did you go by yourself to Michigan?
I did. Although there was my mom's best friend, her son, who was a couple years younger than me. So I was a junior and he was a freshman. He was a really brilliant musician, like child prodigy, he would like get up in front of the church and play the violin and play the organ. And I remember like me and his older brother would just be like, this guy, you know, got all the attention.
Yeah.
Like a precocious little first grader, like playing Beethoven.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was, yeah, exactly. And I remember they were trying to figure out what school he would go to that he could really, you know, he went on to be like a Juilliard musician. Like this kid's like the real deal, Colin. And so it was Colin's mother who had told my mom, hey, Michael and I think Colin should both apply and go to Interlochen. And part of the deal was I would have to room with Colin.
The little boy?
Well, who was a freshman. He would have been a freshman when I was a junior. And I was real bummed about it at first. But then this kid was like a 55-year-old man in like Chicken Little's. But I remember we got to Michigan, and he had like been in the airplane, like dismantling the smoke detector and like smoking cigarettes.
Wow.
Like this kid was like a rule breaker in a way that I was like,
he's like a little Rayan Graff.
he became like a bad influence on me.
I'm assuming that's a
he was another Rayan Graff in my life.
Yeah.
But Colin and I both were like, we would break some rules, and then we had so many rules in Interlochen. And he was like, you know, curfew at 10 p.m. You had to sign in. You had to do this. You like can't drink, can't smoke, all this stuff. So I think like Angela, I also related where like I would break rules, but I would break them responsibly.
Yeah,
you know, I would never go too far.
Yeah, Rayan Graff was like, first episode of the show, they kind of established that Claire Danes is moving from, you know, girlhood into adolescent adulthood.
Yeah.
And like her old best friend no longer suits her, Sharon.
Chersky.
Yeah. So Sharon is no longer kind of like fitting the bill, so to say. So then like Rayan Graff is the bad girl at school and kind of takes Angela under her wing. And there's the whole thing about like when the show starts, Claire Danes has brown hair. And then she decides.
The pilot episode.
Yeah. And then Rayanne says, your hair is holding you back. And then she has that narration that's something like, and I knew she wasn't just talking about my hair. She was talking about my life.
Yeah. She dyes it magenta.
Yeah. She dyes crimson glow, which like I dyed my hair red when I was 14.
Yeah. And I remember that Claire Danes red short haircut. Like a lot of the girls in school were starting to do that a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was the thing. That was the cool thing about the show is like you kind of come into the story a little late and you get the idea of like, oh, Sharon's going, her childhood best friend is going the cheerleader route. And she's like, oh, I want to go. I don't know which route I'm going, but I know it's not that, you know.
But she's into like journalism and writing and creative activity. So it's like that. I'm sure that spoke to you too, that she was a creative writer.
Yeah. And she was like hung out with the cool artsy kids and wasn't interested in theater. And
what did you think of Ricky?
I loved Ricky. Ricky was great because Enrique Vasquez is one of the new friends that he hangs out with. And he's also an outcast because he's gay and not fully out, but very effeminate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And always hanging out with the girls in the girls' bathroom, putting on makeup. And I loved that because especially, I mean, there were rumors about people in my high school and certainly with theater. Being in musical theater, especially like some of the older boys in senior year were starting to kind of come out, but I had never seen a character like Ricky on a show before.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking how cool that was.
Oh, I thought it was magical. I loved Ricky.
Yeah.
And like, do you remember that scene where he's at the dance with the girl who, like, Brian Krakow blows it with this one girl, Delia?
Yep.
And then like,
and Delia gets a big crush on Ricky,
not realizing he's gay. And then but they have this scene where they're dancing to What Is Love, the Hathaway song. And then suddenly Ricky just like starts kind of voguing, like Paris is Burning kind of stuff. And she's like, whoa.
What is happening?
Yeah, but then she's like, oh, okay. And she starts doing it too. And it's like a really sweet scene.
Yeah. And then when I went to Interlochen, there were Rickies at Interlochen. There were kids that were like miles beyond. So I was like, oh, I also felt like it was a cultural lesson for me. I was like, I know who this is. This is Enrique Vasquez. And this is somebody that I immediately accept, you know? So, you know, I do think that there were, as cheesy as it sounds, there were like good, values in that show as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. I think so too.
I do think it's funny that you said, do you remember the scene when it's happened? It's like, he remembers.
Yeah, I remember.
There's only one season of the show.
Yeah, it's like he had pictures hanging everywhere.
Yeah,
I
you
think he
remembered.
remembers the scene from the episode.
Well, so why were you never interested in?
It just was. I was
The
just a
two,
little
like-
too old for it.
Oh, really?
I think so. At that point, it was just like it was a teen show, and
I guess
was
so, yeah.
I was just down the road, and it just didn't. I knew it was a respected show, and it seemed like it was a quality show. I could tell that from anything I just even tangentially came in contact with. It's like, oh, this is a cut above. And then it's like, suddenly it's like, oh, this is one of those classic shows that are better than what TV is ready for. And
Right.
it gets canceled prematurely because there's always, every few years, there was one of those
Yep.
that felt like,
Yeah, Freaks and Geeks
Freaks
kind
and
of was the
Geeks.
closest thing that
Yeah.
came
Yeah.
after that was
They're very.
similar
They're, I
situation.
feel like they're like sibling shows.
yeah, I feel like Freaks and Geeks was more my thing because it was also generational on Freaks and Geeks
Yes,
too,
period
where, you know,
piece.
Joe
Right.
Flaherty's one of my favorite comedians, and he was the dad
Yeah.
on Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what has your relationship to the show been? It's not like, because a lot of
I'm
times
still writing letters
Sure,
to Claire
exactly.
Danes.
Hey, another cartoon, Claire.
Remember,
to the
do you
same.
know-
Mojo?
are you thankful for this artistic letter as well?
It's going to the same address. That they're just
You and her mom have been pen pals
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah, it's because a lot of times on the show, these things are like somebody will be into a thing and they truly move past.
Oh
it.
yeah.
Like this does not feel like that for you though, because this seems like this is one that is propelling you forward in an incredibly positive way. That's not always the experience when people are telling us about the things that meant
Yeah.
something to them.
Yeah,
A lot of
sometimes
times
they
can
just
full on
drop it.
shed it and move on,
but
and then
there
they come
was-
back around to it in some form. But this is like this carries a lot of significance
I
for
think-
your
yeah.
actual life.
I think so, and it's not something that I think about every day, obviously. But when I start to look back on how did I get here, what were the things that influenced and inspired me, that's a huge part. And again, it's a weird thing where it's like the show itself as a creative piece, I have a reverence for and a respect for, but then it was also coupled with this like I have such a crush on this person in the center of this, and those are almost like two separate things, but weren't at the time.
Sure.
Right.
When did the crush
Oh, it
fade?
faded pretty. I mean, I would say within months of. I think within months of being at Interlochen and suddenly having a place where I could really thrive and start building real relationships. You know, part of it too, I think of just like having a crush on someone on TV. I was a kind of a late bloomer. Like I was so overwhelmed by the idea of anything sexual happening to me at that age when a lot of other guys I knew were starting to lose their virginity. I was like, I can't even wrap my brain around being naked in front of somebody. Like that is so I think like part of it too is just a way to have a safe crush in
Yeah.
a direction where like nothing would ever happen there. I remember around that time there was a girl that I had met doing theater and I had a real big crush on her and I knew she liked me. And I remember we went out on a date. And then we like went back to her house and her dad was in the kitchen and she's like, "Hey dad, this is Michael." He's like, "Hi." And then we like went back and hung out in her bedroom and I knew I was supposed to make a move. And I was like, I wanted to, but I was so terrified.
Yeah, her dad's right.
Yeah, dad's
over
there.
there.
I don't know, but I was just like, I
Yeah.
cannot handle this.
Yeah.
You know, so I think
Yeah.
once a little bit later when I was like, okay, I'm like getting a little bit more mature and I can like, I have real friendships and I'm creatively thriving, that crush faded very, very quickly.
Right.
But the love of that for that show remained.
Yeah. But one day there was a day where you looked in your cubby and you took down the photos.
Well, that would have been at the end of the school year. And I also had a collage that wasn't just of her, but I remember making a collage that I hung up on my wall and she was center of it, but there was also like Spider-Man on there. You know what I mean? It was like just everything I liked, you know?
Yeah.
I did.
We got Venom and I got
Yeah.
Claire Danes.
Yeah.
and
Here's the Beast.
So yeah, it represented this thing, and that informed so much of your artistic path and choices. And
Yeah.
it's really amazing.
Oh, I was just going to ask, have you ever gotten to work with anyone from the show?
So one of my very first jobs was for a show called Miracles, which it didn't last as long as My So-Called Life did. It was sort of like the X-Files, but more like with a religious bent.
Oh.
Skeet Ulrich was the lead in it.
Oh, okay.
And I played a ghost of a dead teenager, and whose father was freaking out that he was seeing his son. And the father was played by Tom Irwin, who played Graham Chase,
Wow.
Angela's dad on the show.
Wow.
And I remember being like, "You're Graham Chase." And he was like, "What?" And at that point I had known that he was like also because I'd gone to theater school, so I knew he was like a founding member of Steppenwolf and all this stuff. But I remember like, I'm working with Graham. Graham Chase is my dad in this episode. You
That's
know?
so
That's
cool.
amazing.
But I
love
think
that.
I think he's the only person I saw. Claire Danes at when I was on True Blood. I was at one of the HBO Golden Globe parties, and I think she'd been doing that. What was the movie where she played the woman who like built the
Right, Temple Grandin?
Yes,
Mhm.
Temple Grandin
Yeah.
movie. And so I remember like getting my stuff together and looking across the room and seeing her for the first time,
Wow.
and going, "Oh, that's Claire Danes." And then I went, "Wait." I was like, that was who I was. Like I'd forgotten about it. And I had a moment of like, oh my God, if 16-year-old Michael knew that he was like 20 feet from this woman now.
Your
I didn't-
peers.
Yeah, and I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to go over there, but
So you've never met Claire
never
Danes?
met her. Never met her, never worked with
What
her.
would you say to Claire Danes if you did?
Nice to meet you.
Would you tell her about the comic?
I don't think so.
She would probably be so
We would.
flattered.
It would have to be like, it would depend. Like if I was just like guest starring on an episode of something she was on, probably not. But if we were like, if we were like actually in a cast together and like warmed up a little bit, like I actually wrote you a letter when I was in high school.
But
Yeah.
if you told somebody like that, hey, you were a big part of my artistic journey in life, that you were the impetus for me going for it, that'd be the greatest thing.
That's true.
If somebody said that to you,
Oh my God, yeah.
wouldn't that be? Would
Yeah.
you be walking on a cloud for?
100%. Yeah.
And she would be the same way. I
Yeah.
hope. What if she's terrible
I
and then
mean,
you're
she's a
mad
total
at me
asshole.
because she's like, get away from me. It's like,
I would sit at my little DOS computer, my little computer, and in my little electronic journal, I'd be like, write stories about our meet cute in Los Angeles. I had real.
That's so sweet.
That's on a like floppy disk somewhere that
Oh my
hopefully no one
gosh.
will ever find.
sure.
But it was all like
Mhm.
we bumped into each other, like she's walking out of a store, and she drops her bag, and I pick up her bag. Like it's all like
Oh.
very Victorian
Yeah.
stuff,
Okay. So everything
You
was
throw
very,
your jacket over a puddle.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was all that stuff. Like
very proper, very respectful.
yes, and no lines will be crossed here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of like what would go on to be a very productive, supportive marriage.
Mhm, of course,
Long-term relationship.
Mhm.
Where we're just helping each other out with auditions
Yeah.
and I'll watch the kids while you're on the Homeland set.
That's so
Of course,
sweet.
I'll run lines with you
I'll run lines with
the
you.
night
Yeah.
before. Yeah.
Mhm,
Oh, I
that
love
stuff.
that. My face hurts from smiling.
I feel bad for the people who actually wanted to listen about my so-called life on
No,
this
they
episode.
heard.
Oh no, this is what almost every episode is. We just use the show as a jumping off point to talk about you.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
What did you think of Jordan Catalano? Like, were you threatened by him? Did you not like that she was into him?
He reminded me of so many of the jocks that I went to high school with that I was just like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I never was impressed by him. I was never really threatened by him. I was more threatened by, do you remember the character Corey who was like in one episode? No, was his name Adam? Maybe the actor's name was Adam. There was one episode where this is when Rayanne hooks up with Jordan.
Oh.
And she and Angela have their
Devastating.
huge falling out. That's the other thing. Is like Jordan was an ass. I was like,
He's
I don't care if he
terrible.
can't read. He's an asshole. I don't like
Oh,
him.
yeah, I forgot he can't read.
That was like the one that to make him
Spoiler.
more relatable and empathetic is like you learned out that he learned that he was illiterate.
Okay.
This like hunk that she was in love with.
Sure.
But there's a character that's introduced who comes, I think his name was Corey. He's like painting. He was a painter. He painted
set
Rayanne's
painter.
shoes.
Yes.
And he was like painting a set for a play that they're working on.
Yes.
And he vaguely looked like he was a hunkier version than me, but he vaguely looked like he had like thick black glasses like I had at the time and kind of looked like me. And then like Angela, to prove that she's over Jordan Catalano, like throws herself at him.
Right.
And I remember watching that episode and burning up with jealousy. And I was like, why could I not play this part? And also, why is she kissing? Like, I was like, that was the only time I was ever like, I do not like that. You know, I'm so jealous.
You wanted to be the guy she used to get over.
Yeah.
Jordan.
Well, I didn't get it at the time. All I saw was like, she's trying to kiss him, and that would be fun. You know, that would be exciting. You know,
that guy was cool. I liked that.
He was
guy.
cool. He probably would. I think they were setting him up to be a love interest for Ricky. That was the other thing I didn't get at the time. I was like, oh, he's supposed to be gay.
Yeah,
And
that I as a rewatching it in college, I was like, oh, that is a young homosexual man.
Yeah, the other thing you get
pick up on that.
The other thing you get on the rewatch is like, oh, I see why the show was canceled. There's too much stuff with the parents in it. Like all the scenes with mom and dad talking about the business that they're going to start. You're like, why did they put all of this? This should have immediately tailored down and just focused on the kids. That's the weird thing watching now. You're like, oh, well, duh. This is why kids didn't watch it, because there was just like 10-minute stretches where they're like being audited.
Yeah.
You know, there's like
there were a lot of just, it didn't make marriage out to be super fun.
I did like the stuff where like Angela thought her dad might be cheating on her mom.
Yeah.
That was like thrilling and exciting.
I know. I always liked that stuff too, because I was like, ooh, things are getting shaken up in this suburban bullshit town.
Yeah, but too much mom and dad stuff.
Okay.
Did you notice, like, this is something I just thought about recently, was the kind of parallel between Angela changing her hair to be kind of this next stage of her life, and then her mom. Do you remember her mom starts the show cut her hair really short,
and
like boy
Graham
short?
did not like it.
Graham hated it. I don't know. It just got me thinking about what we do to our hair and how it can dictate the next chapter of our lives.
It's true. What does it say?
Did you ever try anything weird with your hair?
I did, yeah. I mean, I definitely did the like, hey, can my friend try to like bleach it blonde with peroxide? Didn't really work. I would do like buzz cuts and weird stuff, you know, that would like, I'd try to switch it up.
Yeah. Oh, we got to ask. Well, I guess we kind of already figured out what replaced my so-called life.
A career?
Yeah.
Your actual life.
Yeah, my actual life.
Yeah. So that's how you kind of segued past.
Yeah, I just grew. It was one of those things where I like grew out of it, but it definitely, like Tom said, like it had a big influence on where I'm at today, I think.
Absolutely.
There
That's
are
so
moments
cool.
where I'm like, is everything I'm doing today just a result of like a delusional 16-year-old boy who had a crush on an actress? You know what I mean?
Isn't that kind of what all of our stories are, really?
I think so.
I think
yeah.
we all came to LA because we were delusional about something.
And I was lucky that nobody said that you're crazy. Don't like go get a real job. You know, no one in my life like
your parents didn't tell you to.
I was very lucky.
Great.
Very lucky in that sense that like they were like, okay,
that's unique.
Go for it.
That's really impressive because so many people, one of the hardest parts of their journey is explaining to their family, I want to do this thing that you have no context for. But I believe in it enough that this is going to be my future.
Yeah. And they didn't always understand it, but they were always like, go for it.
Oh,
But
that's amazing.
I think that's kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Your dad clearly wanted to understand.
Yeah. And I think had, I was doing well enough in like school plays and extracurricular, I was like getting a lot of lead parts. And I think he really liked watching when people would come up to me after a show and be like, he liked seeing those attaboys, and I think he was like, I'm his dad,
Sure.
So it kind of reflected well on, so I think there was pride, and my mom too, I think they were very proud of that, like the public accolades.
That validation. It's validation so that they know it's just like, and it's not just us believing in our son and maybe deluding ourselves. It's like people who are just telling him he's good in a thing.
Yeah.
With no ulterior motive.
Yeah,
right?
you're clearly very talented.
Yeah.
So it was like easy to support you.
Yeah, and I think once they saw like, okay, I have all these, but I latched onto that and I was like, that's what I'm going for. They were like, great.
That's so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, very thankful. Very thankful for that.
Michael, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on
Yeah.
here. This was so special.
Thank
Seriously.
you.
And-
So neat, so great to meet you guys.
Tell us what you're up to now and where
Okay.
people can find you. And
Immediately you can find my podcast, Bigfoot Collectors Club, wherever you're listening to this. You were at one point a Coast to Coast AM listener.
Yeah.
I've heard you mention it on Best Show every now and then.
absolutely, yeah.
So
Well,
this
Art
is
Bell.
we talk about paranormal stuff. If
Yeah.
people have a paranormal experience, they share it on the show, and then we'll go through history and find here's the like the we did an episode 3-part episode on the Roswell crash and
Okay.
the Loveland Frogman and stuff like that. Stuff that I don't necessarily believe, but I love the stories
Yeah.
Sure.
and I love the weird creatures.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What about Mel's Hole?
Mel's Hole we have not done yet, but Mel's Hole is a great topic.
Oh, get ready.
Maybe you guys should come on and we'll do an episode about Mel's Hole.
I'll talk about Mel's Hole.
And I just
All
stare
day
at you
long, and you're just kinda
confused
like-
the whole time.
Mel's
You're
Hole.
just
Art
kinda
Bell
like-
was really into Mel's Hole.
You're like, dissolution of marriage. Kind of like, no, Mel's Hole was, you knew Art Bell, right? The
Yeah.
show where there was this one, they talked about this hole on this one guy's property that
Yep.
goes like down to hell, basically. If
Yeah.
I remember correctly, they were trying to say like it just goes down, 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 down.
All the way to hell in the underground. And they would hear screams.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's Mel's Hole.
did
Mel's
they
Hole.
fill it in?
No, but they would
No.
throw things down there and
Yeah.
be like, it never lands.
Yeah,
I think he was like throwing trash down there at a certain point.
I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like something that you could easily just. Can we go check it out right now?
No, man, it's a hole
You're-
straight to hell.
that's Mel's Hole. You're gonna mess around with Mel's Hole. How are you crazy? You can see the devil down
Yeah,
there.
you can see the devil in Mel's Hole,
No.
man.
Sounds
No,
fun. to me.
we would come on your show in a second.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Well,
Yeah.
we'll make it happen.
So people can check out the podcast.
Yeah, check out the podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at McMills.
Mhm.
I rarely post these days, but if I'm up to something fun, I'll
Mhm.
post about it there.
Yeah.
So
And what do
that's
people recognize you the most when you're out and about for
all.
True Blood?
True Blood, yeah, and mostly True Blood. But I'll strangely like one episode of Silicon Valley I was on. I get a lot of hey double A,
Oh, crazy ex-girlfriend.
Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And Hot in Cleveland is another show that was on. People, a lot of moms will recognize me
Oh,
from that.
nice.
But yeah,
This was fantastic.
Thank
Really,
you.
This
Thank
is so
you
much
so
fun.
much.
thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
Well, we'll be back later with another episode of Outgrown.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.